You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this section shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
What's wrong?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Do you mind if I call you Reggie?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Sir, where did you grow up?
I grew up in the city of Compton, California. I was born and raised there until about the age of 19.
And who is your father? Who's your father?
My father is Reggie Wright Jr.
Here at the House of Blues in 1996, an off-duty Santa Monica cop working security confiscated a .40 caliber Glock handgun similar to this from a member of Tupac Shakur's entourage.
About 2 weeks after that, I was contacted by Reggie to go over to Santa Monica Police Department to pick up this firearm.
Hackey says he first showed the handgun to his FBI handlers and then turned it over to Reggie Wright Jr. A month later in Las Vegas, investigators say it was a .40 Glock handgun that killed Tupac Shakur. Hackey believes the murder weapon was the same gun he gave Reggie Wright Jr.
I believe it is.
And here's why. Hackey says he asked Wright about the .40 Glock.
He stated once I gave him that firearm, he gave it back to his daddy, who at the time was a lieutenant with Compton Police over the gang division. He stated his daddy booked that firearm in the property, which, was really and truly far-fetched.
And where did your father work?
He worked for the city of Compton Police Department.
And at some point, had he risen up the ranks of the Compton Police Department to become a lieutenant, is it, of gangs?
Eventually captain, but during most of his career was a lieutenant.
Where did you ultimately become a police officer yourself?
Yes, sir.
When was that?
I was a civilian jailer from 1985 until 1989, and then I became a police officer from 1989 until I retired in 1996.
Reggie Wright Jr. was clearly at the middle of the entire orchestration of the assassination, to be sure. However, one must look at the other elements that would have been involved. Reggie Wright Jr. was a former Compton police officer. His record as a police officer was short and unremarkable.
Why did you retire?
I received a medical retirement for I have vascular necrosis in my right ankle, but that's not why I'm like this. This is a result of COVID.
So that's why he's suffering from COVID right now. He came and wiped his butt, you know what I'm saying? He came and feed himself. That's why he's suffering from COVID right now.
After you left the Compton PD or took your medical retirement, where did you next work?
Well, to be honest, my last year or two of being a police officer, I was employed as death row security, head of security, and also had a private security company.
Now, was that something that was called like moonlighting, that officers would moonlight when they were off duty?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to us what moonlighting means when you're off duty?
Well, moonlighting is pretty much just working off duty on your off duty hours.
Investigators discovered that Kevin Gaines wasn't the only officer with ties to death row. Off-duty cops could make good money working security for death row records.
Some of our officers, in working off-duty, they were heavily involved in the whole hip-hop culture, providing security for many of the rappers that were involved with other kinds of crimes. These things began to reflect a completely different view of some of our personnel than we had before.
Working for different companies. I worked for several companies. It wasn't just death row. I worked for trucking companies, doing security. Worked at a nightclub, the Raiders Club, that was inside of the Compton Hotel. Worked several video shoots. Just extra money on the side for off duty.
Compton PD wasn't paying good?
Guess I was a little young and greedy.
Yeah. And then at some point you said one of the jobs that you had was moonlighting for Death Row. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell us what Death Row is?
Death Row Records is a record company that was based out of Beverly Hills, California. And, yeah.
And who ran Death Row Records at that time?
A gentleman that I actually grew up with at elementary school, junior high, and high school by the name of Marion Suge Knight.
And when you say Suge, is that what he would go by?
I call him Suge.
So after you retired, did you, well, actually, let me take a step back. As part of your role as a police officer in Compton, were you familiar with the different neighborhoods and the members of different neighborhoods?
Yes, sir.
Was that part of your job to know what areas were associated with what gangs?
Pretty much a job, and like I said, I started in like 1985, so kind of got familiar while I was working the jail, and it was something that was curious to me. Being that my father was active with the gangs, and it was something that was intriguing to me as well.
When you said you grew up with Suge, did you grow up in the same neighborhood that Suge grew up in?
Yes, about 2 blocks away.
Was that considered Mob Piru territory?
That's correct, sir.
So when you were growing up, were you familiar with the Mob Piru?
They came on eventually later. It was really a Looters Park, Piru area. But then, I guess when I was about in the 7th grade, which would have been like 1978, maybe a little later, 80, they started calling themselves the Mob Piru.
So they were Looters Park, Piru before, and then they transitioned to being called Mob Piru.
Yeah, we pretty much divided it, everything south of Rosecrans was mob, and everything north was, or the other way around. North was mob, and south were Looters area of Rosecrans Avenue.
Were you familiar with a gang called the Southside Compton Crips?
Yes, sir.
How were you familiar with the Southside Compton Crips?
Well, growing up in the city of Compton, we all played sports together, and heard of them when I was playing at Kelly Park, baseball, Little League baseball, at Compton Northern. And then my time in '85 as a jailer, and then working in the streets of Compton as a police officer from 1989.
Were you familiar with somebody by the name that went by the moniker Keefe D?
Well, heard of him. Had no personal interactions with him at that point, especially as in law enforcement. Heard of him, knew of him, but I had no personal contact with Keefe at that time.
So he was somebody that was on your radar, even though you had never met him or you had personal interaction with him.
Heard of him. He was mainly known as at one point he was known as a crackhead, but then later on he was known as a drug dealer. And I mainly was a gang guy, and didn't really enforce on the level of narcotics he was working.
All right, so then you had mentioned that after you had left the Compton PD, you formed a company. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, sir. So, in '94, initially I was using a private security company because I was kind of in charge for security for death row, called Code 4. But once I saw I was about to get retired, I opened up my own private company called Right Way Protective Services. And that didn't really get started until about 1995. But in '94, I was using another private company.
And who were your clients? Was your client just death row, or did you do anything else?
I had a couple of clients, like Honda of Pasadena, which was a automotive dealership, a dealership in Compton that they were repoing people's cars and they needed a car. But my biggest, 95% of my clientele was Death Row Records.
Now, tell me about that. What were you doing when you're saying you're security, or you're a security company that's working for Death Row Records or getting contracted by Death Row Records? What does that mean, actually?
It grew over a time period. In '94, it was just mainly just special events. And then I have a couple of off-duty or retired police officers hanging with the artists.
The protection of the artist to former and current police officers and fire department officials. Of course, not all of the police hired by Reggie Wright were model citizens. The arrests of David Mack and Rafael Perez showed a new level of corruption in the LA Police Department, and both were on death row's payroll.
In '94. '95, '96, it got a little bigger. We had security at the office, at the recording studios, driving Mr. Knight around, two with Mr. Shakur, two with Snoop Dogg, Mr. Rodis. and other artists when they went to promotional events like that. So I could pretty much have about 10 officers working a day.
Officer Kevin Gaines, tied to death row. Off-duty cops involved in the gangster rap scene. David Mack, renouncing the LAPD and coming out as a blood gang member.
Through interviews of former police officers that worked in the death row organization, Mack and Gaines were identified as confidants of Suge Knight, the owner of Death Row Records. They were present during private death row parties, and that's where first time that we were able to really make the connection between those two.
And when you say 10 officers, were the people that you would contract with or work for you in this world, were they largely off-duty police officers?
Off-duty or reserves or retired.
And why is that?
Because they were able to carry guns concealed, where it's not exposed. We had exposed officers at the studio, but mainly the bodyguards carried their weapons concealed.
And we heard...
And for the training as well.
We heard from James McDonald just before you hit the stand. Was it fair to say that they were Mob Piru gang members also around Death Row Records?
That's correct. Mob, Looters, West Side, generally Pirus from the city of Compton.
And are these gangs that are generally associated with the Bloods? Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And the Crips are, let me ask you, Crips and Bloods, are they an alliance or are they typically in conflict?
Typically in conflict. However, Death Row was a unique situation because one of their main artists, prior to Mr. Shakur coming to the label, was Snoop Dogg, who was a known Crip from Long Beach. And they all seemed to have a great working relationship prior to my arrival and even during my arrival.
All right. I want to ask you about Bad Boy Records. Are you familiar with a company called Bad Boy Records?
Yes, sir, I am.
And who, to your knowledge, was running Bad Boy Records in the mid-'90s?
P. Diddy, Sean Combs, Puffy. I don't know what name he's going by today.
All right, so we'll go with Mr. Combs for now.
Okay.
So Mr. Combs was running Bad Boy Record, and then who would you say his most prominent artist at that time was?
Christopher Wallace, Biggie Small.
Okay, and then was there tension between Death Row Records and Bad Boy, the Bad Boy Entertainment label?
At what time period?
Well, you tell me. At any point, did tension develop between Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records?
Initially, when I was around in '94, there wasn't. However, some things happened in '95 that started tension between Death Row and Bad Boys.
Puff the middle of the street, Puff and Suge. All I know is Puff started drinking his champagne while they was talking, and I guess somebody must have said something to him. And next thing I know, Wolf, rest in peace, he let off a shot and let off a couple of shots, and Suge Man got killed right there.
Wow.
In Atlanta.
Wow.
That was the beginning of that whole shit.
Wow.
It started at the Source Awards, but I'm saying
once
it got real.
So you're saying like Big and maybe Pac might have been like.
They ain't even had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, but it affected it's.
Yeah, it went into that, but they ain't had nothing to do with this.
Right.
This was all like CEO to CEO.
There's a famous speech that Mr. Knight gives at the Source Awards in New York in 1995. Does that contribute to it?
Yes, sir. That was August the 6th, 1995. But yes, sir. That was when he let the world know.
And then there's another incident where one of Suge's associates was killed in Atlanta. Is that right?
That was in September 25th, I believe. Yes, sir.
And then is it fair to say that your perception of as security for Death Row Records was that somebody associated with Bad Boy Entertainment may have had something to do with the murder of one of Suge's friends in Atlanta?
That was always the story that was told to us. Yes, sir.
And so is it fair to say by 1995, the end of 1995 that there was significant tension between Bad Boy and Death Row.
Yes, sir.
And to the extent that it even involved violence with regards to Suge Knight's friend being killed.
Correct. That was the first time something escalated to that point. Yes, sir.
As security for Death Row, how did you handle this?
Well, we was always on some type of attention when it came to Bad Boys or going to the East Coast, which Suge and I continuously went to the East Coast because he had a lot of business. His distributor, the main distributor, was located out there. The big trade, like the magazines and stuff, was out there. So I can honestly say he and I, and maybe a few of his homeboys, went out there at least once a week, once a month, I'm sorry, during that time. When Mr. Shakur came home, we went down a little bit, but we were still going out there, but we didn't go as much.
And when you say when Mr. Shakur came home, at some point did Death Row sign Mr. Shakur to its record label?
It's debated how that happened, but
I'm not asking about the how. I'm just saying, did it happen?
Yes, sir. I believe he came home October the 12th of 1995.
Now, as security for Death Row, were you aware that Mr. Shakur was actually out on a bond, an appeals bond from prison from New York?
Yes, sir.
And I believe the allegation has something to do with sexual misconduct. Is that right?
Yeah.
If you don't know.
I mean, something like that. I wouldn't call it that, but yes.
Okay, whatever it was, there was some kind of issue. Mr. Shakur is in prison in New York, and then Death Row Records posts an appellate bond for Mr. Shakur.
They have some other companies, but yes, sir.
Okay. And then Mr. Shakur does he move to where Death Row is, or does he stay in the New York area, or where does he go?
No, I remember, I picked him up from the airport. Me and one of my security guys named Kevin Hackey.
Another former Tupac bodyguard, is challenging Reggie Wright Jr.'s truthfulness.
I'm offering Reggie right now $100K to take a polygraph. He had no involvement whatsoever to do with Tupac's killing.
Hackey, according to these court filings, worked for 2 years as an undercover agent for the FBI and ATF, helping the feds.
To investigate Marion Knight and Death Row Records for racketeering violations.
Keep in mind, where the actual shooting happened isn't as full of pedestrian traffic as it would be out on the strip. The shooting happened off the strip. A lot of people think it was right on the main drag, and it wasn't. And you don't have the foot traffic where this happened that you do where people cruise.
This is a crazy day in hip-hop history. A guy who admitted to lying about a major part of the case took the stand and testified, and somehow he wasn't even questioned about that lie. I'm talking about the clip where he allegedly admits that he told Frank Alexander to lie about the chain incident. And if that's true, it raises a whole lot of questions. And more importantly, what was the real reason Tupac took off on who they jumped? I'm with Team There's no number 13 on the person getting jumped. But here's another part that really has me thinking. Reggie Wright Jr. and Kevin Hackey picked Tupac up from the airport. And when you look at the timeline, that raises an even bigger question. Were the feds already watching Tupac the moment he stepped off that plane? Because if they were, then this wasn't just about what happened in Vegas. It could mean there were already eyes on Tupac 4 months before everything went down. Now, I'm not saying that proves anything, but it's questionable, and I mean very questionable. But when you put all these pieces together, the testimony, the alleged lie, the chain incident, the people around Tupac, and the possibility of federal surveillance, there are some serious questions that deserve answers. And that's what makes this case so fascinating. The more testimony we hear, the more questions seem to come up. So what do you think? Was that lie overlooked on purpose, or did the prosecution simply choose not to go there? And were the feds already watching Tupac before he even got out of the airport? Because if that timeline is accurate, that could be a very important piece of the story. Trust me, we not finished with this testimony. Let me know what you think in the comments. I appreciate all of you and catch y'all on the next one. Peace.